This is lesson 362 in the classical Chinese dynasties and empires. We've got the classical Chinese dynasties and empires. There are three of them. First, you have the Zhou Dynasty, and that lasted a long time, all the way from 1027 BCE to 221 BCE. So that's like over 800 years. Keep in mind, this is still BC or BCE, whichever you prefer, and we're counting numbers downward towards zero as we are moving forward in time. Then you had the Qin Dynasty, and look at this. Now, this is very important because the Qin Dynasty gave China its name. But look what a short time it lasted. From 221 BCE to 206 BCE, that's only 15 years. So you know that the Zhou Dynasty goes from being more than 800 years to the Qin Dynasty, which is 15 years. And then you've got the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE. Or you can say 206 BC to 220 AD. Either way, it's fine with me. Keep in mind, here's what we should notice about the timeline here with regard to the Han Dynasty. It actually straddles the year zero. So you're just in the first half of the dynasty, if we're measuring the time our usual way, you're counting downward toward zero. And then in the latter half of the Han Dynasty, you're counting upwards, away from zero. So the Zhou Dynasty, you can say Zhao if you want to. Emperors in the Zhou Dynasty expanded Chinese territory through a feudal system. And we're going to learn much more about feudalism very soon. Feudalism is a system where the emperor gave nobles land in return for military service and other services. That actually matches the definition of feudalism in Europe as well. The philosophers Confucius and Lao Tzu were both from this period, and that's going to be important. We've got to study them. The Zhou Dynasty produced several Chinese philosophies. From 500 to 200 BC, three schools of thought about human nature and the universe developed in China: Confucianism, Taoism, and Legalism. And Chinese philosophers were concerned with how to live best in this world. So Confucianism. Confucius was a philosopher trying to understand the order of the universe, just like our Greek philosophers. And he was motivated by all of the moral decay and the violence that he saw all around him. And his ideas stressed the importance of traditional values. He emphasized the natural order. And this says that the universe is orderly and everyone has a role to play in it. And they also emphasized the notion of filial piety, particularly with regard to fathers and sons. This is the devotion and the honor that one has to one's elders. So it's children to parents. Most people think of society as consisting of two things: the individuals in the society and also the classes, the social classes within which these people exist and live out their lives. But Confucius, he thought that the most important aspect of society was not the individuals or the social classes, but the relationships in society, particularly the relationship between superiors and inferiors. Now, he's not suggesting that some people are better than others, although he may have thought so. But we're not talking about whether you're just inherently better than somebody else. We're talking about your position in society. People in the inferior positions owed obedience and loyalty to their superiors. But people in that superior position, the higher position, they owe something too. They don't get away scot-free. They owed it to their inferiors below them to set a good moral example and to care for their inferiors. And people's respect for and deference to their various relationships and the proper behavior within those relationships, that was what held the social order together as far as Confucius was concerned. Confucius's ideas of duty and humanity are perhaps the most important that he had. Duty dictates that individuals subordinate their personal needs to the needs of family and to the needs of community. And further, everyone should be governed by the 5 constant relationships. These are the relationships that just never change. And so they keep society together as long as people are observing these relationships. You've got ruler to subject. You've got father to son. That's perhaps the most important one. You've got older brother to younger brother. You've got husband to wife. And then you have senior friend to junior friend. So those are the 5 constant relationships. Confucius recognized the importance of hierarchy in society. So inferiors, they owe their superiors loyalty and service, and superiors owe their inferiors care and responsibility. And so Confucius' system encompassed all of Chinese society, from children and their families all the way up to the emperor and his government. And the idea behind it was to keep Chinese society harmonious, because it sure wasn't while he was alive. Confucianism guided China until nationalist and communist revolutions in the 20th century. So this was a long time, millennia. And Confucianism is still strong in China today, although not very strong outside of China. According to Confucianist principles, government positions were awarded based on results of difficult examinations that were designed to eliminate unqualified individuals. So it was based on merit, it was based on knowledge, it was based on talent, whether you got important government positions, not based on who you know or who your relatives are or anything like that. Confucius was known to the Chinese as the first teacher. He was born in 551 BC, and Confucius tried to convince those in power to follow his ideas. And his followers wrote down his sayings in the Analects. Then we move on to Taoism. And Taoism were from the teachings of Lao Tzu, opposite ideas of Confucius. They rejected formal structures. Confucius loved formal structures, particularly those 5 constant relationships. They rejected the idea that all people have a specific role to play, emphasized in Confucius as the natural order. Taoism called for disengagement with society, breaking away from society. Instead, allow nature to dictate what happens in life. And that yin and yang symbol that everybody's familiar with, everybody knows it, it's right there, that's associated with Taoism. So Lao Tzu was the founder, and look at this saying that he has. It's so fundamental. It's so illuminating. Water is the softest thing, yet it can penetrate mountains and earth. And this shows clearly the principle of softness overcoming hardness. The main ideas behind Taoism. Taoism has no rigid rules or rituals like Confucianism has. It emphasized naturalness and simplicity and spontaneity. Don't go out and plan a bunch of stuff. Like Buddhism, Taoism emphasized detachment from selfish desires. And one of its main components was the principle of wu-wei, non-doing. In other words, what he meant by non-doing was stop trying so hard to do things and make things happen and just be. Look at the sequence here. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And it all starts, so your destiny all starts with your thoughts. This is what Lao Tzu would say is against wu-wei. Check out this link on YouTube. A spectacular drummer giving it all he's got on a simple little kiddie song. It's hilarious. Lao Tzu's ideas were political and ethical, not really spiritual. If somebody followed the Tao, the way, and acted in harmony with the universe's purposes, people would prosper. The government should be open to all men of superior talent. So there he actually agreed with Confucius. The yin and the yang. The yin and the yang, this symbol represents two opposing forces. Everything has elements of both. Nothing is pure yin and nothing is pure yang. And so yin, some of the attributes that yin has, it's cool, it's dark, it's female, and it's submissive. And the yang is warm, light, male, and aggressive. Nobody is one or the other. Everybody has elements of both to them. And it shows the Chinese emphasis on balance. The mandate of heaven also came from the Zhou Dynasty period, and we've talked about this. It's also known as the blessing of the gods. Your dynasty rules at the blessing of the gods. You cannot continue to rule without their blessing. And so this mandate of heaven says that the emperor was chosen by heaven to rule. And as long as that dynasty maintained good government, then that dynasty's mandate of heaven was valid. So the mandate was lost if the dynasty failed to provide good government. And the loss of a dynasty's mandate could be used as a reason for rebellion and overthrow. And the dynastic cycle repeated throughout Chinese history all the way up until the 20th century. So what is this dynastic cycle? It's a political theory, and it says that a dynasty will rise in political and economic and cultural power to a certain peak. And then it will decline to the point where it loses its mandate from heaven. And then it will fail and be replaced by a new dynasty. And the reason for this decline is always moral corruption. That's what starts the entire downward trend. And so here's another representation of the dynastic cycle. We had a previous representation of this very same cycle in a previous lesson. And so at the very beginning, the dynasty is founded by a powerful leader. And he initiates a period of great power and prosperity. He restores peace. He restores glory to the country. And he builds roads, makes things better, improves irrigation, improves everyday life for the people who are the subjects of this dynasty. But then we always get a turn for the worse. There's a period of decline. Taxes go up, social services decline, more natural disasters happen, and not just natural disasters, rebellions and invasions. And the leader, at some point, it becomes obvious, loses that mandate of heaven. And so you've got this period of rebellion in which the dynasty is overthrown. And once that happens, a new leader comes along, and now he holds the mandate of heaven. And like I said, throughout Chinese history, this happens over and over. The beginnings of the Great Wall, the famous Great Wall. Under the Zhou Dynasty, various states built huge, long walls, really independently of each other. It's not really a one wall, it's more of a network of walls. So these walls were not really connected to each other. The Zhou Dynasty, like we said, lasted about a little over 800 years. It was also the smallest dynasty in terms of territory. And eventually they could not control their empire, and the Zhou Dynasty collapsed. And it collapsed into a period of warring states, where no one particular group could gain control of all of China. This lasted quite a long time, and it is extremely influential to understanding Chinese history in total. This was all resolved eventually by the Qin Dynasty. The Qin united China with the harsh rule of Qin Shi Huang, and he was the first emperor of a unified China. China was connected due to increased transportation and uniform weights and measures. And we've seen that happen before, haven't we? Especially standards of weights and measures, standards of coinage, improved transportation. This seems to be a theme with the development of empires. So the Qin Dynasty began connecting the previous disconnected sections of these walls in order to create one great wall. And this was for the purpose of stopping barbarian invasions. And Qin Shi Huang also had many roads extended. I love this picture. You ever wonder what it looked like as people were actually building this great wall? And here's a construction site where they're actually doing that. Qin Shi Huang also built the Grand Canal. And the Grand Canal was extremely important to Chinese prosperity. It connected all of the agriculture in southern China with these large manufacturing cities of northern China. So southern China could now more easily feed northern China, and those cities could have lots of people living in them and produce goods. Qin Shi Huang also introduced a bureaucracy to replace the old feudal system that we talked about. And Qin Shi Huang adopted this legalism philosophy. Legalism was based on the idea that human beings are evil and selfish. And it's not the last time we're going to see that philosophy. And therefore, since human beings are evil and selfish, harsh laws and methods are needed to maintain order. So legalism stressed obedience through fear, and Qin Shi Huang's legalist policies included such things as hard peasant labor. I mean, there is a wall that's got to be built. Repressing all philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism, other than legalism, and burning their books. He may also have ordered some Confucian scholars to be buried alive. So, limiting the power of the nobles. Remember, he's establishing an autocracy and a bureaucracy. And so harsh, impartial punishments were needed for transgressors. The Qin Dynasty was much bigger than the Zhou Dynasty. However, it only lasted 15 years. And Qin Shi Huang was very unpopular. No surprise there. His rule was very harsh. He subscribed to legalism, and he forced people to work on public works projects like the wall and the Grand Canal for free. Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BC, and his son, Qin Shi, ruled for 4 years. Qin Shi allowed his first minister, Zhao Gao, to run the empire for him. And Zhao Gao ran the empire with even more cruelty than Qin Shi Huang. And the Qin Dynasty was overthrown in 206 BC after having had only 2 emperors. The Han Dynasty. The Han had a long and prosperous reign. They combined the ideas of Confucianism with government, and trade flourished, helped by the Silk Road. What was the Silk Road? You can see it right here at the bottom. The Silk Road was a network of trade routes that linked civilizations from China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea where the Roman Empire was. They traded goods along this road: silk, porcelain, glass, spices, etc. And the Silk Road led to a diffusion of ideas like printing and gunpowder and sailing technologies like the compass. And it led to the spread of major diseases, including the Black Death in the 1300s, which we will study at the end of the semester. Here's the thing about the Silk Road. Yeah, it was called the Silk Road, and it was called that because a lot of silk was moved along it. Silk was in high demand all over the known world. The Romans wore lots of it, even though they never really got near China. Only the Chinese knew how to produce it at one point, and they kept it a strict secret. But the Silk Road was not actually a road. It was actually just a loose network of trade routes. Very few merchants traveled all the way along it from one end to the other. The vast majority of traders just moved back and forth along the short part of it that they knew, trading and moving goods along, much the same way, a fire brigade moves buckets of water to the fire. People are standing and they don't move, the water moves. The hub of the Silk Road was basically in Central Asia. Many Central Asian cities developed along the Silk Road. And the Silk Road was arduous. I mean, it was hard to travel on. It had to get past lots of geographic barriers like mountains and rivers and deserts and lakes and seas, etc. And bandits and thieves and tax collectors and toll collectors also had to be dealt with. Other contributions of classical China: defensive technology, the Great Wall, the crossbow. Also, paper, sailing technologies like the compass, the rudder, the water mill, standard weights and measures. The decline of the Han Dynasty. What I want you to do is, as we talk about this decline of the Han Dynasty, think about the connections between the way the Han Dynasty declined and the Roman Empire declined, way over on the other end of the Silk Road. One of the things that caused the decline of the Han Dynasty was invasions, nomadic invasions by Huns and other groups looking for land and loot. Land shortages. There was a growing population, and that led to land shortages and rebellion among the peasants. Corruption. Officials and the ruling class generally used wealth for personal gain rather than for collective good.